Hi guys, my name is Amanda. Welcome back to Literary Weaponry. Today what we are doing is my March wrap up from 2021. Now, in March, I actually ended up reading, I think it was 12 books? Let me double check that. Oh no, March I read 13 books total for 5,169 pages. Each month of this year I keep reading more and more, and I really don't think I'm going to be able to keep that up in April. However, let's see, in March I read, it was mostly fantasy because that's my usual genre, fantasy romance. It's just my thing. Anyway, let's talk about what I actually read. Let's start with my first read of the month, which was from one of my favorite series. It was An Unexpected Peril by Deanna Rayburn. This is the 6th book in her Veronica Speedwell series. This is set in Victorian London. I mean, they do travel outside of London, but it's mostly in London. This main characters are Stoker and Veronica herself. It is, like I said, a series. It's a mystery series, which is a female lead Veronica, the male lead Stoker, and this is the 6th book in the series. I don't want to give spoilers for the rest of it, but it also has a really slow burn romance. I think this is actually the strongest book in the series. It had a lot more we had a lot of character development up to this point, but I feel like they'd really come into themselves totally and completely at this point, and I enjoyed that quite a bit. It's just a series I love. I'm going to keep reading it forever. Deanna Rayburn is a fabulous writer. Her characters are magnificent. Everything is just vibrant and full, and it's amazing. Her writing is amazing. You don't want to put it down. Highly recommend this series. The first book in the series is, the first book in the series is A Curious Beginning. If you enjoy mysteries of a historical nature, highly recommend. Fantastic. Give it a shot. The next book I read was actually a reread. This is probably the 4th time I've reread this book, and that is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I read this typically when I read it. Like I said, it's my 4th time. I read it as an audiobook. It's a YA fantasy romance. It's pretty short, but it's become like a comforting hug to me. Spending time with an old friend when I'm reading it, and I love that feeling. Is it the best book in the world? No. Every time I read it, I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. By the way, I gave this one 4 out of 5 as well. Didn't mention that. Anyway, every time I read it, I give it a 4 out of 5. It doesn't change my enjoyment. Like, a book doesn't have to be 5 out of 5 to be a favorite. Yes, I'm aware that there's flaws in this story. I'm aware that it's not the most magnificently written. I'm pretty sure this was actually her debut novel, but it is a wonderful book. It is a comfort to me, quite frankly, and I love that for it. It's fantasy romance, fae, drama, romance, it's just good stuff. Anyway, the next 2 books I read were also rereads. I seem to have a theme. It was From Blood and Ash and A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire from the Blood and Ash series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Now I've read this series, I think this was my 3rd time I've read it now. I love it. It is a new adult fantasy. There's werewolves and vampires and some interesting character dynamics. There's magic and chosen one. It is full of tropes, and I love it. It's great. Just because something's full of tropes doesn't make it a bad story. I like tropes. They work for me. They work for a lot of people. That's how they become tropes. Did you know that? Anyway, love it. The 3rd book in the series, Crown of Gilded Bones, I think, comes out later this month. I take that back, later in April. I think it's April 24th. Might be wrong, but it's a new adult fantasy romance. You enjoy that kind of thing, give it a shot. Good stuff. The next books I read, and I'm saying books plural because I read a 5-book series next, just binged it in 4 days, and that is the Air Awakened series by Elise Kova. Again, we have more fantasy romance. I told you, it is my favorite. Anyway, these are YA leaning. I read it as a series through Kindle Unlimited. I don't really know why I picked it up. I was browsing one day and clicked on it in the Kindle app, and here we are. I read all 5 books, I think, in 4 days. Like, I plowed through them. And I gave the series as a whole a 3.5, but I still enjoyed it. Like I said, something doesn't have to be a perfect 5 for you to like it, and that's fine. It's no big deal. With Air Awakens, we have another case of chosen one. She has the special magic, and that's fine. But you know, it's pretty much what you would expect from a fantasy romance, you know, the whole 9 yards. The only thing I feel like I really need to comment on with this series is that there are scenes in it of romanticized abuse, and that's something that really bothered me. Otherwise, I probably would have given the series. I gave it a 3.5. I might have given it more had it not had those scenes, but they were intense, and that bothered me a lot. There's also unnecessary character deaths in this series. I don't mind a character death if it works to push the plot along, but if it's just for a shock value, I don't like that as much. But overall, it was pretty good. It was an easy read, took very little brain power. You know, I read it early in March when I was still in the midst of my February depression, because February just sucks. Anyway, I don't know what that noise just was. I have my windows open because it's a beautiful day. I wouldn't say it's something that fantasy lovers need to read, but you know, it was an easy, brainless time. It was enjoyable. No further complaints for me. Next. Like, everybody's reading this right now. They're reading this or Shadow and Bone trilogy, which I actually read it late in 2019, so I didn't feel a need to reread that. And well, of course we're reading this because the lovely, stupid, focus on that, please. Come on, give it to me. Because of the Netflix show coming out. Oh, yes, I'm going to watch it. I think most of us are, and that's fine. I'm okay being trash for the Grishaverse. However, when the show was initially announced, I thought it was just going to be based around the original Shadow and Bone trilogy, which I was fine with. I'd read it recently enough. I felt confident remembering, you know, the characters and everything. But then I started watching the previews. I found out Kaz Brekker and company are going to be included. Now, I read Six of Crows in 2017. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I gave it a 3 out of 5 at the time because I was still concerned about people's opinions of me. I've gotten over that at this point. I'd give, if current attitude me was rating the book that I had read at that time, I'd have given it a 2. I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it at all. Didn't want to ever think about it again. But with the show coming out, I decided I wanted to, even if I didn't like it, I wanted to refamiliarize myself with the character. So I picked up Six of Crows. I also grabbed Crooked Kingdom, obviously. Now, what I did not expect, I freaking loved it. I did not expect that at all. Like I said, when I originally read it, I did not like Six of Crows. I disliked it so much that, like, I think I'd read it through the library and just, like, it never even crossed my mind to read the second book. I had no desire. I didn't want anything else to do with these characters. This time around, I am trash for Kaz Brekker and crew. Like, it's just a thing at this point, and I've accepted it, and we're just living with it, and it's fine. It's all fine. You all know what these books are about. You don't need me to summarize them. Just, I reread it. I ended up loving it. I want to read it again. Like, I'm still, even though I've read more since I finished reading these two, I'm still kind of in book hangover from it because I keep thinking about Kaz and Edge and Jesper and Wylan. Like, I love these people. These sweet little dumplings. They just need some love. Anyway, you don't need to talk about these books. You know what they are. Loved it. I'm gonna reread them again at some point. I actually ordered the special editions of this so I can have them in hardback without the stupid Netflix thing on it. Because I need my books to be pretty when I love them, and I love these, and they're beautiful. Anyway, Yeah, I've brought it up before, but this year I'm trying to read all of my backlist Alcrate books. They're actually, if you look on the shelf behind me, those are some of them there, and then there are more over there. I recently took a couple off the shelf because the author showed her ass, quite frankly, and I'm not into that. Racism is not to be tolerated. So if you know who I'm talking about, I don't want to give her any more attention, but what a piece of shit. Next book I read, I pulled from my TBR jar for my Alcrate books, and that book was Star Daughter by Shveta Thakrar. I looked up how to say it. I'm pretty sure I got it right, and I'm sorry if I didn't. Now this is, obviously it comes from Alcrate, so it's a YA fantasy. I will say it's a lower YA fantasy. Like some of them you can tell they're written for like the 17, 18-year-olds. This felt much more, in the lower range, like 14-ish. Maybe that's just my interpretation of it, but that's how I felt about it. I really enjoyed that. It didn't feel like a typical YA fantasy. There were definitely elements in it that you don't find in a lot. It wasn't, fairies and kings and queens and princesses and yada yada yada. It had a very interesting premise. She is our main character here. I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but she is the daughter of a star, quite literally, which makes her part star because her father is mortal. And the stars are living, breathing creatures, and they live, in the sky, and there are different courts, and there's obviously, still political tension between courts and between the ruling families, but it felt so different with the magic from the star aspect and that kind of thing from it. It also is, the characters are mostly non-Caucasian, which is not something that you find a lot of in fantasy novels. It was interesting getting to read from that perspective. While I can see the positive aspects of this book, I love that it took a different approach to the YA fantasy genre. It really wasn't for me. Like I said, it's a lower YA fantasy, not really my thing. I do like a little bit of romance and things in my fantasy novels, and this was very family oriented, which, so a lot of it was very positive family oriented. Our main character loves her family, and she was trying to do her best in that family dynamic. And that's not a plot concept I like. I really don't like found family. I don't like the family dynamic. It's not my preference. Overall, I can see how this book is so beloved by a lot of people. I enjoyed getting the different aspects that you don't typically see in YA fantasy, but I gave it a 3 out of 5. It was okay. I like upper YA. It's just my preference, and that's fine. Still a great book. I highly recommend it if you enjoy that kind of thing. Last book on my list is one I actually didn't finish. It's my only DNF of the month, actually, and that is The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black. I think I finally need to just accept that Holly Black's writing isn't for me. I read her, Cruel Prince? I wasn't blown away. Cruel Prince was okay. The second book in that trilogy, Wicked King, I actually really enjoyed Wicked King. I can't lie about that. Wicked King was great. And then the third book was just garbage. It was so bad. And I tried to read this, and I just don't think Holly Black's writing's for me, and that's fine. No big deal. Not every book is for every reader. I got about, I'd say 40% through this or so before I gave up. I can see why she's a beloved author and why her stories are loved, but it's just not my cup of tea, and that's fine. Yeah, those are the, 13 books I read this month? It was a lot. I have to say my favorite read of the month that wasn't a reread was An Unexpected Peril. So, loved that. For rereads though, I can't do better than Blood and Ash. I don't think I mentioned it, but from Blood and Ash I give 4 out of 5, and Kingdom of Flesh and Fire I give 5 out of 5. Anyway, no, that was my March reading. I don't really have a TBR going into April right now. Right now is April 6th because I'm horrifically behind on everything. Nothing new there. Right now I'm reading, I don't even know what I'm reading. I don't think I have any books going right now, to be honest. I take that back. I'm reading the audio of The 10,000 Doors of January. Can't say I'm terribly impressed at this point, but I'm only like 30% in, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, that was my reading for March. Overall, not a bad month. My most books I've ever read in a month, most pages I've ever read in a month. Can't complain about that. I'm hoping to read, I'd say 5 books this month. I've already read 3, so maybe I'm a little conservative. Anyway, I hope you are all doing great. I hope you had a wonderful March. I hope the year is treating you kindly. If you want to follow me, you can certainly do that. You can hit like, you can do whatever you want. Do what makes you happy, and I will see you next time.